Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. Hollow Dusk wore its silence like a coat too heavy for the weather. The town's main street lay in a straight line that felt longer than it was, a stretch of brick and fading paint and windows that reflected a sky always the color of dishwater. The stoplight at the single intersection worked. Technically, it flicked red to green with the patience of a metronome, though there was almost never a car to command. The old theater's marquee had been dark so long the letters were brittle, fossilized announcements for a summer film no one remembered. Life here didn't move, it ticked. Maya could tell the time by the diner's coffee. At 7 a.m., the pot tasted like the burnt edge of toast. By noon, it was a dark mood. By 3, it turned into apology. Some afternoons, she watched the reflection of herself in the steel urn ripple as coffee trickled out, her hair in a messy knot, her name tag missing a letter, M-A, like the town had taken a bite. She kept a practiced half-smile for the regulars and let the bell over the glass door mark the hours. Jace worked 2 blocks down at Cotter's Hardware, where dust lived longer than people did. He'd learned that if he said 3/8 drill bit with conviction, customers believed him even when they needed half-inch. He loved the ritual of small usefulness, cutting new keys, the bright zing of a blade through brass, the gift of giving someone access. On slow days, he lined up padlocks on the counter and played a guessing game with himself. Who looked like a lock, who looked like a key. Lena minded the register at the antique shop with the curtained windows and the bell that didn't ring so much as whisper. The place smelled like lemon oil and a softer decay. She had a habit of running her fingers along carved wood for the stories it might keep, scars beneath shine, old handles polished by hands long gone. She had the kind of face that made people confess things, what they regretted buying, who they used to be when they bought it, the way certain objects keep a room from feeling empty. Lena smiled and nodded and sometimes felt like the town's attic, full of things no one wanted to throw away. They shared a rental above the pawn shop, a long rectangle of rooms with a sloping hallway that made pennies travel on their own. Their couch had been rescued from the curb and creaked like it remembered a better life. The bathroom window never quite shut, and on windy nights the curtain breathed in and out, as if the house itself was sleeping. They survived on shared groceries, crosswords abandoned on the kitchen table, and the slow build of in-jokes that stuck to them like static. Another thrilling evening in Graveyard of Boredom, Jace announced, shouldering the apartment door open with his hip. He dropped a brown paper sack on the table, a crooked bouquet of diner muffins, payment for Maya covering a split shift, and flopped onto the couch. Maya, still in her apron, held up a flyer she'd unpinned from the diner corkboard. It was fresh in a way nothing in Hollow Dusk ever was. Crisp paper, ink so black it stayed black in the dim. The words were dressed like a promise. One night only, the great ventriloquist. An evening of laughter and wonder at the Rialto. Saturday, 8 p.m. A sketch in the center showed a man in a suit with a puppet on his knee. The man's smile was small, precise. The puppet's was wider. Someone woke the Rialto up? Jace sat forward as if the thought alone might raise the lights. They handed a stack of these to me to put out by the register, Maya said. Some lady with perfect handwriting said the performers passing through honestly feels like a prank. Lena came in behind them, the brass key to the apartment turning with a tired gasp. She stopped in the doorway when she saw the flyer, and something in her face shifted, a flicker, like remembering a dream you don't want to. "The Rialto," Lena said softly, crossing to the table. "I thought they were going to turn it into a storage unit." "Same thing," Jace said. "You store people in one, you store memories in the other." "Ventriloquism," Maya read, like tasting a word before deciding if you liked it. "Haven't thought about that since I was 8 and saw a puppet on TV with a laugh that sounded like teeth." "That's not what laughing is," Jace said, but he said it gently, like you'd say, "Don't open that door." Lena traced the printed lines with a fingertip. "Look at the eyes." "The guy?" Maya asked. "The puppet," Lena said. "They're off." All drawings in the town were off, on menus, in school books, even on warning signs. Faces never quite set right, eyes not looking where eyes should look. But she wasn't wrong. The puppet's eyes were oval and glassy, and just a touch too far apart, as if whoever had drawn them was thinking about fish. "Anyway," Maya said, folding the flyer and tucking it beneath a magnet on the fridge shaped like an orange cat. "We're going. It'd be illegal not to, with entertainment this hot." Jace saluted. "Fine. We'll dress up. I'll wear my least stained shirt. Lena can bring an iron." Lena didn't answer. She was listening. Down the hall, the apartment let out one of its small old noises, a distant tap like a finger on glass. The curtain in the bathroom window breathed in, breathed out. They went because you go in a town like Hollow Dusk when something new shows up, whole years passed in a shrug otherwise. When Saturday came, they closed their places early. The diner hung a closed sign. Cotter's Hardware locked its cases. The antique shop drew its curtains and looked from the street like a sleeping eye. The Rialto lit itself from within for the first time in a decade. The neon traced its name with effort, one letter at a time, R, then I, then an old cough before ALTO flickered shakily into place. People gathered in little clusters on the sidewalk, their voices balancing between complaint and hope. The ticket taker was the woman with perfect handwriting. She wore a ribbon around her wrist like a neat bandage and smiled at everyone like she had been waiting. "3?" she asked, looking at the trio like she already knew them. "3, Maya said, and handed over bills soft from being folded and refolded. Inside, the theater smelled like a handful of scents layered together: melted dust, stale popcorn, the paper of old programs gone brittle in some unseen drawer. The seats were a faded red that remembered what red had looked like when the town was younger. The stage curtain was closed, a heavy maroon, the bottom edge frayed into a quiet fringe. A trunk sat near the footlights. It had brass corners and buckles that shimmered in the stage glow. Someone had polished the leather until it shone like a story. "Props," Jace whispered. "Or corpses. There's really no in-between." "Shh," Maya said, but the corner of her mouth moved upward. They took their seats in the middle row, the safe zone where you could watch everyone else having an experience and pretend you were too. Lena sat on the aisle. She always did. She liked exits in her peripheral vision. She could watch the curtain tremble minutely as if breath behind it. She could see the trunk. She could see the man when he walked out. He wasn't there yet. Hollow dusk filled the theater in the way a drought fills a cup when rain comes, carefully, suspiciously, as if it might be rationed. Faces they knew, faces they'd only ever seen through windows. Mr. Cotter himself in a suit that didn't suit him, Mrs. Bellamy from the library with her hair pinned like a map of a country no one traveled anymore, teenagers pretending not to be thrilled, tourists with cameras drawn by the rumor that the Rialto had reopened, that Hollow Dusk had something to offer that wasn't a story about nothing. A light snapped on near the wings. A figure leaned briefly into it, then leaned back out, like testing the temperature of a room. A hush moved through the seats, not silence, but the prelude to it. The lights dimmed, the maroon curtain swayed like a sleeper turning over. Somewhere behind them a child laughed, and then immediately put both hands over his mouth as if he'd broken a rule. A single spot fell on the trunk. It clicked. Something inside had pattern, a locking sequence not entirely mechanical. Maya felt the hair rise on her arms. Jace laced his fingers together and pressed his knuckles to his mouth, as if that might hold something in. Lena gripped the armrest, her thumb finding the shallow groove hundreds of hands had made before hers, a fingerprint worn into wood by time. The curtain did not open. The trunk did. The lid lifted slowly as if gasping. A hand, gloved, wood, appeared first. It was shaped like a hand, but too smooth, too perfect, like an idea of a hand carved by someone who had seen hands in pictures. It gripped the edge of the trunk and held. The breath the audience had been collecting released in a small, collective sound. A buckle unfastened. The hand withdrew. The lid closed with a soft swallow. A voice then, a man's voice, even and precise, drifting from behind the curtain like a radio tuned well, not a crackle to it. "Good evening, Hollow Dusk." A murmur returned, low and pleased, like the town had been complimented on its name. The voice smiled without showing teeth. "Thank you for waking the Rialto." Someone clapped, others followed. The sound approached and retreated in the room like gentle surf. "I am," the voice said, "what my poster promised." The poster on their fridge, the words on crisp paper, the puppet's eyes too far apart, the man's mouth small and certain. Maya imagined the magnet, the fat orange cat, holding that promise to a door that never closed properly. "Laughter," the voice said, and let the word sit there for a second, alone. "And wonder." The lights went out. There was a click like the smallest lock engaging. A weight shifted on stage, a shadow passed behind a screen. In the dark, Hollow Dusk held its breath as if something important might slip past it if it exhaled. The sound of the trunk's buckles unfastening came to them like footsteps down a hallway. Maya felt the urge to look behind her, though there was nothing to see but more dark, more people whose faces had paused at a strange half-expression. Jace's wrist pressed against hers on the armrest, warm and human and present. Lena closed her eyes and saw wood, grain swirling like fingerprints, the way knots in lumber sometimes look like eyes if you're already afraid of eyes. A light returned, not the stage lights, smaller, nearer. A lantern set on the lip of the stage. It threw a circle that made the dark more itself beyond it. The trunk stood inside that ring. The buckles were open. A shape rose, not a man, not yet. A silhouette with seams. Then the curtain moved. Then the lights came up. But the stage was empty. A hitch of laughter broke the spell and turned into the relief of clapping. The audience decided it had witnessed a trick, something cleverly done, something impressive. Hollow Dusk liked the idea of being impressed. It looked good on the town. It made the stores brighter, the sidewalks less tired, the air a little less like a damp towel laid over everything. That was something, Jace said, his voice curious rather than convinced. Maya looked at the trunk. It sat like a well-behaved dog. She told herself the glove had been a puppet, and nothing more. Of course it had. Her heart beat like a fist on a wooden door. Lena didn't look away from the wings. She felt impossible but unmistakable. A gaze returned hers from a darkness just beyond the light. It wasn't hostile. It was measuring, like a craftsman eyeing a length of wood before the cut. The lantern fluttered as if someone had walked past it. In the aisle to their left, the curtain breathed from the open bathroom window of their apartment miles away. A small tapping began somewhere, far back in the theater, near the projection booth, maybe just the building cooling its old bones. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice said, nearer now, everywhere now. "Shall we begin?" Lena's hand tightened on the armrest. She pulled air slow into her lungs, made it thin, made it quiet. On the stage, the trunk's lid lifted again. This time it did not stop. Something climbed out that wore a suit like a memory and smiled like a secret. And in the front row, a child laughed with his hands still over his mouth, and somewhere far away, a magnet shaped like an orange cat loosened. When the man finally appeared, he didn't walk so much as unfold. His limbs seemed a little too long, bending at the wrong pace, as though joints were hinges installed by someone who had only studied anatomy from afar. His suit was gray, not faded, not new, just gray in a way that drained color from everything around it. The lantern light carved shadows along his cheeks, and when he smiled, it was a smile rehearsed in silence. The puppeteer carried a single figure tucked against his chest. The puppet was dressed like a little boy in pressed trousers and suspenders, its carved hair parted neatly down the middle. Its eyes were painted a deep brown, and yet they caught the light too well, catching, holding, reflecting like something more than paint. The puppet's grin was wide enough to feel permanent. "Good evening, Hollow Dusk," the puppeteer said aloud, but the puppet's mouth opened in perfect sync, its voice, higher, sharper, carried across the theater. "Evening, folks." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd, quick and nervous. The trio felt it ripple through their row too, though none of them laughed. Jace leaned back in his seat with his arms crossed, lips quirking like he'd spotted the trick. Maya shook her head slightly, unable to ignore the way the puppet's eyes tracked the audience. Lena only stared. She was listening for something beneath the words. "Let's start with a joke," the puppeteer said, his voice even, his smile thin. The puppet turned its head to face him. "You? Telling jokes?" A pause. The crowd chuckled. "Of course," the puppet said, and jerked its head toward the audience. "Don't worry, folks, he's been practicing." Laughter again, louder this time. Hollow Dusk liked being included, but Maya felt it land wrong, hollow, like a script being read line by line. The puppet's gaze lingered on her too long, its painted grin stretching a fraction wider as if it knew. The show wound on. The puppeteer pulled figure after figure from the trunk, a tall, thin man in a derby hat with a sharp-toothed grin, a stern woman in a faded bonnet whose head tilted too far when she spoke, a childlike figure with cheeks carved too pink. Their movements were smooth, unsettlingly smooth, more than wood and strings should allow. They blinked. She swore they blinked. Every joke landed, every laugh followed. The room swayed with the rhythm of amusement, a tide of grins that felt heavier the longer it went on. The puppeteer never broke his own half-smile, never laughed with them. His eyes only scanned the crowd as though taking stock, counting chairs, measuring faces. Near the end, he placed the boy puppet on his knee. Its voice rang sharper, closer. "You've been such a wonderful crowd tonight, and this is only the beginning." Something about the way the puppet said it made Lena shiver. Not a line. A promise. Afterward, the crowd spilled into the street, flushed with excitement like they'd been given a holiday. Hollow Dusk hadn't felt alive in years, and suddenly every step was quicker, every conversation louder. Someone said it was the best show they'd ever seen. Someone else said they hadn't laughed that hard in ages. The Rialto's doors stayed open, the warm light a lure against the endless dusk. Maya, Jace, and Lena lingered outside, standing close beneath the marquee's flickering letters. "Okay, yeah, that was weird," Jace admitted, rubbing his jaw. "But also, pretty good act." "You thought that was normal?" Maya snapped. "Those things blinked, Jace." "Animatronics, maybe. Clever trickery." He shrugged, but his eyes darted toward the theater again, uncertain. Lena hadn't said a word. She was staring at the flyer Maya had folded and stuck in her jacket pocket earlier. Only now, in the glow of the neon, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. The puppet in the drawing. Its eyes weren't just wrong. They were familiar. She closed the flyer quickly, almost afraid of what else she might see. The puppeteer packed up inside, the sound of buckles and wood echoing in the empty theater. Alone, he hummed, not a tune anyone recognized, just a low, rhythmic hum that matched the flicker of the lantern. His puppets were lined in a row, each staring straight ahead. Each eye gleamed faintly, as if catching more than light. One of them twitched. Its painted mouth opened just slightly, but no sound came out. Only the puppeteer noticed, and he smiled. Hollow Dusk hadn't buzzed in years, but after the ventriloquists' show, the town carried itself with a strange brightness. Flyers reappeared in shop windows overnight, neat rows of them tucked under wiper blades and pinned to corkboards. By Monday, even the diner felt different. Maya caught herself refilling mugs faster, her regulars talking louder, everyone replaying the same jokes they'd heard on stage like children clutching candy. He said it just like that, swear to God. Don't trust a man who shakes hands with his own shadow. A farmer at the counter recited, slapping the table. The whole row burst into laughter, the kind that echoed, sharp and brittle. Maya forced a smile and topped off his coffee, but she noticed their laughter didn't stop when the moment passed. It stuck to their faces, tugging the skin tight like they couldn't put it down. Jace noticed it too at Cotter's Hardware. Customers wandered in, grinning, distracted, repeating lines from the act as if they'd been rehearsing them for days. A man buying nails muttered under his breath, "I'm just a puppet in someone else's hands." He said it twice, like he didn't know he had. When Jace asked him to repeat, the man blinked and looked confused, then chuckled nervously. And at the antique shop, Lena watched strangers come in not for relics, but for mirrors. They stood before the glass, practicing expressions, smiling wider and wider until their faces trembled. She caught one woman tilt her head to the side, puppet-like, and whisper something as if her reflection might answer. By Thursday, the ventriloquist had announced a second performance. This one drew outsiders, cars that hadn't rolled into Hollow Dusk in years, parking along the cracked sidewalks. The trio went again, not because they wanted to, but because everyone else seemed unable not to. The show opened with a new puppet. This one was taller, dressed in a plaid shirt and suspenders. Its jaw hung slightly crooked as though set wrong. The audience roared with delight. Maya's stomach dropped. The puppet was too familiar. She leaned into Jace, whispering harshly, "That looks like the hitchhiker. You remember? The guy who came through town last week? You served him coffee." Jace frowned. Coincidence. But Lena was already trembling. She'd seen it too. The puppet's fingers twitched with a nervous habit she recognized, the exact same tapping rhythm the hitchhiker had used against the diner counter. And when its glass eyes rolled over the crowd, they didn't just look, they lingered. After the show, Hollow Dusk buzzed again, people pouring into the streets, laughter spilling into the night like broken glass. But Maya, Jace, and Lena stayed back on the steps, watching the doors close. "That was him," Maya said firmly. "The traveler. Don't tell me it wasn't." Jace ran both hands over his face, muttering, "It can't be. It's a trick, a gimmick." "Then why?" Lena whispered, her voice unsteady. "Did the puppet's lips move when he wasn't talking?" They fell silent. Inside the theater, the ventriloquist packed his trunk as always. He whispered something only the puppets could hear. They stirred faintly in the lamplight, their glassy stares shimmering, their jaws trembling. For a heartbeat, it sounded like muffled cries, like voices trying to escape a throat carved in wood. The puppeteer only smiled. By the second week, Hollow Dusk had changed. Not all at once, not in ways a stranger might notice, but in the pauses, the glances, the subtle things that had once made the town quietly dull. The silence that used to feel empty now felt listening. The laughter that used to be scarce was everywhere, brittle and constant, clinging to lips long after jokes ended. And every night the Rialto filled with people, as if the ventriloquist's shows had become a ritual no one dared skip. The trio went again, not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't ignore what was happening. That night's opening act introduced a puppet no one had seen before. She wore a diner apron, her carved hair pulled into a bun. When she tilted her wooden head, Maya's chest went tight. It was Anna. Anna, who hadn't shown up for her last shift. Anna, who was supposed to have left town to visit her sister 2 days earlier. The puppet's mouth opened. Its voice rose sharp and bright. "Don't spill the coffee, honey." The audience laughed. Maya nearly doubled over. Her hands clutched the armrest until her nails bit into the fabric. "She says that," Maya whispered hoarsely. "Every single shift, she says that." Jace tried to speak, but nothing came out. His jaw worked silently, as if he were the one being puppeted. Lena gripped his arm, her eyes wide with terror. They weren't imagining it anymore. After the show, Hollow Dusk poured into the streets again, delighted, chattering, repeating lines like scripture. But the trio stayed behind, waiting in the shadows until the crowd thinned. Through the theater's side door, they glimpsed him, the ventriloquist. Alone, speaking softly as he placed each puppet back into the trunk. His voice was calm, coaxing, almost loving. The puppet shifted faintly in response, heads tilting, glass eyes flickering. And then for the briefest moment, Anna's puppet raised its hand. Not smoothly, not like the others, but jerky, as if something inside was clawing its way up. The hand froze midair. The ventriloquist leaned down, whispering something too quiet to hear. Slowly, the hand lowered again. The lid closed. The next morning, Lena couldn't stop shaking. She told them what she had seen in the antique shop the night before. Mrs. Hark, the librarian, wandering in close to closing time, except her eyes weren't her eyes anymore. They were glassy, blank, as though she'd been carved hollow. She smiled at me, Lena said, her voice cracking. But it wasn't her smile. It was painted on. Maya buried her head in her hands. Jace tried to reason it out, tried to offer explanations, but his words rang empty in the little apartment. Every excuse collapsed under the weight of what they'd all witnessed. The ventriloquist wasn't just copying people, he was taking them. And now every face in Hollow Dusk felt suspect. That night, they swore they wouldn't go back. They swore it over cheap dinner and bitter coffee, swore it like a pact. But when the marquee lit again, their feet carried them there anyway. The theater was already packed. The crowd hummed, voices blurring into one collective, anxious laughter. The trio slid into their seats like moths to flame. The curtain twitched, the trunk glowed in the spotlight. And when the first puppet emerged, Maya almost screamed. It wore a hardware apron, a brass key dangled from its wooden belt. Jace's key. It looked at them, straight at them. And it grinned. The Rialto emptied faster than usual that night. Maybe people were too eager to carry the show's glow home, or maybe the puppeteer had ended things abruptly, as though cutting a thread mid-performance. Either way, it left the theater still humming with something that didn't fade. Maya, Jace, and Lena stayed behind. Tonight, Maya whispered, her fists clenched. We're finding out what he's hiding. The side door was unlocked. It shouldn't have been. The metal handle was warm, as if someone had just released it. Inside, the air was different than during the shows. No laughter, no clapping. Only the faint smell of wood polish and something metallic, sharp, like coins left too long in a wet hand. The hallway behind the stage was narrow, lit by a single bulb that buzzed with a nervous hum. Shadows clung to the corners, and each step of their shoes echoed as though they were trespassing in a mausoleum. At the end stood a door, half open, spilling lantern glow. Jace pushed first, and the three of them froze. The room was lined with shelves, floor to ceiling. On every shelf sat puppets, row after row, staring straight ahead. Their glass eyes gleamed, catching the lantern light, but these weren't props, not toys. They breathed. Chests swelled slightly, too slow, too shallow. Fingers twitched. One puppet's eye rolled in its socket, following them. "Oh God," Maya whispered, clutching Lena's hand so tightly her knuckles went white. The workshop was worse than anything they'd imagined. Wooden limbs hung from hooks on the wall, half-carved heads stacked like masks waiting for a face. But mixed in with the wood, skin, hair, a human jawbone fused into a carved skull, a tattoo etched across a puppet's porcelain arm. Lena's knees nearly gave out. "They're alive," she choked. "He's keeping them alive." At the far end, a figure twitched violently, its wooden jaw opening and closing soundlessly, glass eyes wide with terror. Inside, beneath the varnish and seams, they could see it. A soul clawing to get out, a person still there. The muffled sound rose then, filling the workshop. Cries, screams, whispers layered over one another, spilling from 100 throats locked in wooden mouths. Maya slapped her hands over her ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just in the room, it was inside them. The puppets were begging to be freed. Then the hum came. Low, steady, crawling along the walls. The puppeteer's hum. It seeped into the workshop before he did, carrying the rhythm of a lullaby that didn't comfort, only commanded. The puppets stiffened at once, their cries cut short like a hand pressed over a mouth. And then he stepped inside. His lantern swung, throwing long shadows across the shelves of half-human dolls. His eyes landed on the trio as if he'd been expecting them. His smile didn't change. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. His voice was calm, but behind him, the puppets began to twitch again, their jaws clicking like teeth in the dark. Lena's breath came fast and shallow. Jace's fists curled uselessly at his sides. Maya could only stare as the puppeteer set down his lantern, placed a gentle hand on one puppet's head, and whispered, "Hush now, don't spoil the surprise." The puppet's eyes rolled back, its mouth closing tight. The lantern flame swelled higher, shadows bent. And the workshop seemed to lean closer. The flyer called it the grand finale. By Saturday night, Hollow Dusk pulsed with an energy that didn't belong to it. Cars jammed the streets, strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder with locals, the Rialto's neon sputtering in exhausted loops of red and gold. Everyone wanted in, everyone needed in. The trio stood across the street, staring at the glowing marquee. "This is it," Maya said, her voice flat. She hadn't slept since the workshop. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw rows of wooden faces screaming soundlessly. "We stop him tonight." "Stop him how?" Jace muttered. His hands shook as he stuffed them into his jacket pockets. "We don't even know what he is." "We know enough," Lena whispered. Her eyes were fixed on the theater doors, where people streamed inside as if pulled on invisible strings. "If he keeps going, he'll take everyone. He'll take us." They crossed the street together. Inside, the Rialto had never been so full. Every seat was taken, people even standing along the walls. The air buzzed with anticipation, hot and damp, as if the building itself were breathing. On stage, the trunk waited in its spotlight. The curtain trembled faintly, though no draft stirred. The puppeteer entered slowly, lantern in hand. His gray suit gleamed under the lights, his expression calm, precise. The audience roared with applause. "Good evening," he said, voice steady as a sermon. "Thank you for returning. Tonight, Hollow Dusk, you will see my truest work." The trunk's buckles snapped open one by one. The lid rose. A puppet emerged, tall, crooked, with glassy eyes that rolled independently. Another followed, a woman with painted hair and a diner apron, then a child, carved cheeks too pink. its little hands jerking in sharp motions. Then more and more. They poured out of the trunk like an endless parade, filling the stage, their wooden feet tapping the boards in rhythm. Every puppet looked familiar, their faces distorted, stiff, but recognizable, neighbors, friends, strangers who had vanished. The crowd didn't gasp, they cheered. Maya's nails dug into Lena's arm. "They don't see it," she hissed. "No," Lena whispered. "They refuse to." The puppets began to speak, not one at a time, but all together. A chorus of voices, high and low, male and female, harmonized into something that wasn't music. It was laughter, warped, fractured, echoing. The sound rattled the seats, shook the lights, pressed against skulls like hands squeezing temples. Maya clutched her ears. Jace doubled over, teeth gritted, Lena's eyes filled with tears. The puppeteer only raised his lantern higher. "Behold," he said, "the eternal stage. Their souls will never wither. Their laughter will never fade. This is true art." The puppets twitched violently then, their laughter faltering. For a moment, the trio heard it, the muffled cries bleeding through the act, real voices, begging, screaming. "They're alive," Maya shouted, rising to her feet. "You're letting him kill them!" But the audience only laughed harder, drowning her voice. They weren't hearing what she heard. They saw only the show, only the spectacle. Desperate, Jace lurched forward, stumbling down the aisle toward the stage. He grabbed one of the footlights and yanked, the bulb bursting with a crack. Sparks showered across the boards. The puppets shrieked, not with laughter, this time with pain. Their glass eyes rolled, jaws snapping wildly, voices cutting loose in a deafening wail. The theater erupted into chaos. Some in the audience screamed, others clapped, convinced it was part of the act. The puppeteer's smile finally broke. For the first time, his expression twisted, not with anger, not with fear, but something darker. "You don't understand," he hissed, his voice booming unnatural through the theater. "This is the only way to keep them, to keep you." The puppets lurched forward in unison, their movements jerky but powerful, arms outstretched like marionettes yanked by invisible strings. The trio met eyes at the same moment, their pact silent but certain. If this was the grand finale, then they would tear it down. The Rialto shook. The floorboards rattled under hundreds of jerking wooden feet. Puppets lunged across the stage, their jaws snapping open and shut like traps, voices spilling out in a hideous mixture, laughter, screams, begging. Maya scrambled onto the stage, dragging Lena by the wrist. Jace followed, clutching the shattered footlight like a weapon. The heat of the broken bulb burned his palm, but he didn't let go. "Find the lantern," Maya shouted over the cacophony. "It's his power." The puppeteer raised it higher, the flame glowing unnaturally bright. His gray suit rippled like smoke. "You can't fight this," he hissed. "They belong to me. You belong to me." He flicked his wrist, and the puppets surged forward, strings of shadow yanking them into motion. A dozen wooden arms reached for the trio at once. Jace swung the footlight, sparks flying, catching one puppet's carved sleeve. The wood smoldered, then burst into flame. Its scream was raw and human, a soul tearing free. The body collapsed into ash. Others shrieked in chorus. Some tried to lunge at the trio, but their movements faltered, glitching as if the strings were fraying. Maya snatched a heavy stage prop, a sandbag tied to a pulley, and swung it toward the lantern. The puppeteer sidestepped gracefully, but the flame flickered, dimming for the first time. "No!" he roared, voice splitting into 2, 3, a dozen echoes at once. "You'll ruin the masterpiece." Lena fell to her knees beside one of the puppets, a woman in a diner apron. Its glass eyes flicked toward her, tears shimmering beneath the varnish. "Anna," Lena whispered, her trembling hands reached out. "I'm sorry." She yanked the puppet's head back and snapped its wooden neck against the floor. The scream that tore free was both relief and agony. The body crumbled, the soul gone. The puppets wailed in unison, their harmony broken. The puppeteer staggered, clutching his lantern. The flame sputtered violently now, shadows unraveling around him. His calm smile was gone, replaced by a mask of fury. "You think you're saving them?" he spat. "You're nothing but destroyers. I gave them eternity. I gave them purpose." Maya lunged, grabbing the lantern by its handle. The puppeteer clawed at her hands, his fingers cold as steel. The flame flared, spilling shadows across her face. For a heartbeat she saw them all, the souls, hundreds of them, pressed against glass, begging for freedom. She smashed the lantern against the stage. Glass shattered, oil spilled, fire roared upward in a violent bloom. The puppets screamed, every one of them screams that shook the marrow of the town. Then they began to fall, one by one, crumpling into heaps of wood, porcelain, and ash. Their eyes dimmed, their mouths froze open. The puppeteer staggered back, clutching his chest, his suit smoldering. No, you don't understand. Without me, without strings." He collapsed into the fire. And when the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but cinders. The trio stumbled from the Rialto, coughing, shaking, their clothes singed. Behind them, the theater burned quietly, not like a building, but like a candle snuffed out. The crowd had vanished, not dispersed, vanished. The streets were empty. Hollow Dusk was silent again. Back in their apartment, the three collapsed onto the couch, too exhausted to speak. The silence pressed down heavy, but for the first time, it was just silence. No hum, no laughter. Then Maya froze. The bathroom curtain rustled. On the kitchen table sat something that hadn't been there before. A puppet. Small, carved neatly, with painted eyes, too familiar. Its jaw creaked open, its glassy gaze rolled toward them. And in a voice not their own, it whispered one word. "Maya."